try to make their own story.
Yeah. So we don't have much time. You're almost done, and I have like a list of questions, like just as we talked. But many people think about TED, and like you're a global speaker trainer for TED. So could you tell us a bit about the magic of this conference, and why is it so successful, and how do you prepare people, to have this like 20 minutes, 15 minutes of saying what you want to say?
Um, wow, huge question.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about TED to me is not only the conference itself, but how much it affected everything about how we communicate. It started from I worked in companies that decided to have TED-like events. Today, when I work with CEOs, etc., they would usually not speak for more than 20 minutes. There's very few who will speak longer. The whole thought is let's have it short. The whole idea um, of using stories and the idea of bringing yourself of that you are important, that talking about self is important. I think that all of that came from TED is interesting and it's great. And also the notion of a talk, of speaking in spoken language, not in high, as you said, when you spoke in English, that you would use words that you would never use in
Yeah.
everyday life. And TED has brought the idea of the opposite. No, we want the adi we have in conversation only for 12 18 minutes on stage with cameras all rehearsed, but we want the same person. We want that authentic, raw, if possible, experience. And so the first time I've worked with TED Global was 2013, and since then I've worked with over 100 of speakers and tons of conferences, and it's really the journey of preparing to a TED Talk is very personal. Some For some people it's faster and easier, but I would say it's never linear. It's never, you don't start from a point and then you go and get to the other point. There are a lot of, you write a text, you say it out loud, it sounds not so good, you rewrite it, you find your idea, you change your idea, you find great stories. Then suddenly you find a story. I had a speaker that he had this whole talk and he rehearsed it in front of his friend, and his friend said, "Hey, wait a minute, you have this story that you have in the middle? That can be a great opening." And so that changed 2 weeks before the event. So I think also the magic of TED is the notion that you can take complex ideas and make them available for a large audience, which is also the challenge of working with TED speakers who are, for example, scientists. How do you take a scientist who has been working on something for years in their lab, and now they have 12 minutes to explain it to a general audience they've never spoken to, and go ahead, do it. So it's,
Yeah.
and I find it as a very rewarding thing when it works.
Yeah. And tell us about the process. They don't write it themselves and rehearse themselves and that's it. That's why you have trainers, right? So do you have different trainers for the content and for the story and then for the way they appear on stage, or it's like the same person guiding you all through the process, or
So TED works more and more with curators who are from that topic, working specifically and deeply with the speakers on their talk, because then they bring their point of view, they bring what they know, they know that they have depth to work very closely. And then there's usually that's today, that has changed in the last few years. And then
Mhm.
there's usually a speaker coach who would work with them on making it conversational, on making it lively. Although a lot of the curators have learned to do that too.
Yeah.
In the past, a lot of our work with TED speakers has been to be, I would say, to represent the audience. That's how I see the role of a speaker coach in that sense, meaning
Mhm.
to be the ear of the audience and the eyes of the audience, who will say in the text, even that the speaker will write, we will have rehearsal, the speaker will say the text, and then we can say things like, that doesn't sound like you in conversation, or what about when you said that, or a general audience will not understand that, that's jargon. So or what about data? Some audiences really need data, you have a lot of story. Or where are the emotions? Some audiences need emotions. So it's making sure that all the elements are there, and then it's having rehearsals to bring it to a level that it's conversational, that it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like a person is saying a text for 12 minutes, which is super difficult for people who haven't been through acting school for 3 years.
Yeah, it is difficult. And do you know the podcast The Moth? Do you know
Of
it?
course.
I really, really love it. And when you talked about like what is different with TED and what's the difference, I think that if nobody knows, it's like if one of the best podcasts ever. People telling their own stories, and um, and I think that it started with the conference, right? So
Mhm.
there are lots of like speakers giving you the information, and you're getting smarter, and you're feeling very smart. And when they thought about like telling the story and more like what you have in the moth, people really talking about themselves, it's so much more interesting, and it's so much
Right.
more than just a conference, right? So I don't know what came first, the moth or TED speakers. I don't know.
I don't know. TED, well, TED has been around since 1984, which is something people don't always know. But I
Wow.
know. Yes, I know.
Wow.
Um, I don't know about the moth. That's you gave me something to
Yeah.
Google after our call.
I know that they started with live shows, so it was not so
Right.
maybe and it was in the community. They started with
Hmm.
communities and telling their own stories within communities. So it started very differently from a different point of view, I guess. But so you got a recommendation for a podcast too. So. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoy talking to you, and I'm sure
Likewise.
yeah, and we could have another one because I'm sure we have much more to talk about. So where could people find more about you and hear from you and contact you?
Well, first of all, the website, you can go to the website of my company, which is virtuoso with a Z or Z.com. And also, I would welcome people emailing me if they want. It's Abigail, Abigail, at virtuoso.com. Or find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I love having conversations and hearing from people about things that work in the real world and questions that they have. So
Sure.
I'm happy to continue conversations with people.
Yeah, and I love talking to you. So
Likewise.
that's a really so it was fun. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. And if you want to hear more about what I do, just go to invincibleinnovation.com, and I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See you. Bye
Thanks,
bye.
Adi. Bye.